Well, this week, many people have been praying for former President Jimmy Carter and his family and reflecting on his life and legacy. President Carter, of course, a longtime advocate for Habitat for Humanity. In 2018, he and his wife, Rosalind Carter, hosted a work project in South Bend. The Greater Indy Habitat sent volunteers there to participate that week. Well, this past week, President Biden made a surprise trip to Ukraine, meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky to mark 1 year since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So let's talk about that now with our panel, along with some of this week's other big headlines. With us today, we have 2016 Vice Chair for the Indiana Trump campaign, Tony Samuel, former Communications Director for the Indiana Democrats, Jennifer Wagner-Chartier, along with Purdue Political Science Professor Dr. Martin Sweet and UIndy Political Science Professor Dr. Laura Wilson. Laura, I'll start with you. As President Biden makes that surprise visit to Ukraine 1 year after the Russian invasion, how significant a trip was that in the midst of this ongoing conflict?
Well, this was essential. As you mentioned, it's 1 year. It was a surprise trip. We knew he'd be going to Poland, but he was taking this long train to get in and out before anybody ever knew. And this is a place where you don't have American troops, so the stakes were very high. But there is question. We're sending a lot of money. We're certainly sending a lot of our support. What's going on there? I think this was really important for the Biden administration to support and back up their claims in terms of what we're doing, and also for the Ukrainian people to see that they have that American support too.
Greg Pence mentioned some of that funding in the interview we just did. Martin, all of this, of course, coming in the middle of a very fraught time in the geopolitical landscape, especially as it relates to our relationship with Russia and with China.
Well, presidents typically sort of enter situations abroad and can expect sort of American support behind. We try to speak with one voice abroad.
Leave politics at the water's edge. Maybe not in this modern era.
We've stopped
right?
doing that, right? I mean, we've immediately seen sort of this partisan backlash to the trip. And so in our age of polarization, I think some of that rally around the flag effect is probably going away.
Jennifer, there was also this back and forth this week with some who questioned why the president hadn't yet gone to Ohio to the train derailment the transportation secretary did this week. What do you make of that criticism that he should have gone to Ohio instead of Ukraine? Is that overblown in your view?
Yes, yes, it is. I think, obviously those things are not comparable whatsoever. I think the trip to Ukraine was really important for all the reasons that Martin and Laura outlined, for unity and show that support. And I think, we obviously have a major disaster in Ohio that has to be dealt with. That's going to be a longer term thing. I'm never going to be someone who's like, oh, he should have gone there. He should have taken his Biden branded water with him. I think he did the right thing.
Tony, speaking of former President Trump, he was there in Ohio this past week, but he's also facing some new polling now showing him trailing Ron DeSantis now in the Republican primary field. What do you make of some of those numbers out this week?
There's going to be polls kind of all over the place. That I think the key thing for President Trump is that he's either, in the lead, as was in the Quinnipiac poll from last week that we discussed a little bit, maybe second place now by 8 points or so, with the rest of the field way behind. That's going to go back and forth. If DeSantis, his name will stay in there, but we'll see if he gets in the race. A couple of things on the other issues. On the Ukraine activity, President Biden going over there, okay, that's fine, but the American public is more and more skeptical because there is a blank check and another $500 billion written without the accountability. I agree with Greg Pence completely. This administration has a habit for doling out hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars, if you look at the pandemic relief and other infrastructure relief, without the accountability, and that needs to change.
When we talk about those polling numbers, though, and DeSantis now ahead of Trump in some of those Republican primary polls, you've spent a lot of time in Florida, Martin, in Florida politics. What do you make of some of those numbers, and where does Mike Pence fit into this equation here potentially?
Right, well, in a competitive primary, what you're trying to do is sort of pick a lane and then dominate that lane. One of the challenges for DeSantis is sort of this question of timing. Does he get in? Is he sort of the Chris Christie hot flavor of 2012, the sort of Scott Walker of 2014, both who got in 2016 and their time had passed? So does DeSantis get in? Is he part of that now? And one thing will be wondering what everyone else does and how that would affect his choices. And I think always looming at the back end of that for him is, even if DeSantis gets in and wins, what would someone like Trump do? Would he throw his support behind the nominee? That's probably doubtful. Could run third party, or he might just tell his supporters to stay home.
And what about Mike Pence? Does he have a lane at all?
Well, so far he might, right? There is sort of that evangelical lane that could be there. But we've seen that evangelical lane do really well in Iowa. but it's usually stopped there. And so that support of either Huckabee or Cruz hasn't really been able to last.
Cruz won there in 2016. Laura, all this here is the former VP is now reportedly being compelled to testify to the special counsel's office. Despite his objections, this could be quite a legal and political stalemate.
It is, and especially if he does ultimately decide to run president. And you're talking about Trump and Biden and questions about confidential documents. There are a lot of different things that loom over the election. I agree with Martin's analysis for the former vice president. He has that potential to be an appealing candidate to some voters, but this certainly isn't something he wants hanging over his head as he's considering that run.
All right, let's talk about the news at the State House this week, Jennifer. A lot of protests this week as we reach the halfway point now of the legislative session, with several culture war issues making news this week, from the bills dealing with transgender youth to the amendment defunding the Kinsey Institute at IU.
Yeah, a lot going on. I think some of those bills have been watered down or did not make it past the halfway point this week. But gosh, it just hurts my heart to see all those families, those kids there, and to watch lawmakers time and again targeting people who need the most support, putting them in the crosshairs, punishing them for who they are, singling them out for who they are, and preventing them from having access to critical care that they need. It's not a good look for Indiana, and it just makes me so sad.
Tony, meantime, the state budget bill moving forward now, the governor getting a lot of the money that he requested for things like school textbooks, but not all the money he requested for public health. How do you see some of those negotiations playing out?
Well, negotiations is the key word there. The House passed a $43 billion budget, about half of that for education. Education funding has increased. Health care funding has increased. It'll go to the Senate. The Senate will have their own version, and we'll, look at the April budget forecast, and they'll come to some agreement, and I think it'll be good for both health care and education.
But obviously education always kind of top of the list when it comes to the state budget. The governor had asked for more money for things like textbooks, and so far at least that's still in the budget bill.
It seems to be. There is questions in terms of the budget about school vouchers and whether or not they still get the same money that public schools would in that increase, and questions about accountability and unusual alliance you see between Democrats and maybe some of the Senate Republicans. But for Holcomb, I feel like it's probably about as good as he could have asked for, at least where the budget stands right now compared to what he asked for last month.
And we'll see if he can get some of that money he'd requested for public health. It's always kind of a push and pull with governors and the legislature, and especially lately, it seems maybe Governor Holcomb doesn't have as much sway in the legislature as maybe governors have had in the past. How do you see that dynamic here in the final weeks of the session?
Well, it's interesting to see that Holcomb seems to be sort of taking a playbook from other governors around the country, right? These latest, what have sort of been cast, these anti-LGBTQ pieces of legislation, are also being cast sort of pro-parents' rights legislation, which is what we saw in Virginia. It's how Glenn Youngkin flipped the state of Virginia. He did sort of the anti-ESG investment package, which we saw actually DeSantis do down in Florida. Right. And so I think it looks like what he's doing is sort of copying what has been very popular in other states and seeing how that plays out in Indiana.
He also wrote an op-ed this week about immigration with the governor of Utah that made some news as well.
Yeah, that was phenomenal to see. I've said many times on this show that I think Eric Holcomb has a chance to really define his legacy here in the last 2 years of his term. And it was, as a liberal, exciting to see him speak up on that issue.
Okay, we got to leave it there, but we're going to have much more with our panel here coming up. Coming up next, a bill headed for the state Senate would make it a crime to be too close to the police, literally. We're going to hear some of the debate on that bill coming up after the break.